Hello and welcome to another episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host Mike Roderick, and with me today is Mr. Sean Oriano. How are you, Sean?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. We are continuing on with our Kali Linux series, and in this episode we're going to take a look at setting up maybe like a little sandbox or an environment that we can play and use all the cool things that come with Kali Linux. So Sean, what do you have in store for us here?
Well, what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at setting up a lab so you can practice your skills, and so we here have something to demo against why we are doing our thing. And anything we're going to do here as far as setting up our lab is going to be the same type of stuff that you can do on your own home environment. Now you have a choice. You can set up in a virtual environment like we are, or you can, if you want to do it that way, you can set up a bunch of physical machines. It's really kind of your call. I just chose to do virtual machines here because it works, it's easy, it does everything I need it to for here, and I'm cool with that. That's the extent of it. But I could have taken it further, but like I said, don't need to here.
Kind of a pain, right? I mean, that's one of the great things about virtualization nowadays. Most of our machines can handle running several virtual machines. So I remember way back when, Sean, when I was going to, that was back in 2003, I set up a whole test lab. I had to go out and buy old machines. And so you have 4, 5, 6 machines sitting there, all sucking power, all generating heat, KVMs between them, and things like that. Nowadays, virtualized. My laptop, I can run 4 or 5 different virtual machines, and we can have our entire sandbox right here on our laptop. So I think it's a great way to go. But as you said, either way will work.
Yeah, it's your call, and you're going to find, to be honest, you're going to find some situations where having a physical box is really going to have to be the way you go to test against. But it's not going to be, those labs. I had to do the same thing, where you had to have that whole. You felt like you were sitting in the middle of a server room, big wraparound stuff. I swear my cubicle mill work looked like the bridge of the Enterprise with the way it's wrapped around. There's so many stuff happening there. You don't need to do that, but if you do have a specific hardware environment or something unique that you need to test against that you just can't emulate properly in a virtual environment, then yeah, you're going to need the hardware. You just have to have it. If you're going to be doing tests against maybe wireless access points using the stuff here, you don't necessarily have an effective way to really emulate that within a virtual environment. And I know someone might say, well, you could do this, this, or this, and you have all these workarounds. Well, I don't want to have workarounds in some of these cases. I want to actually have the real thing, because that workaround may not simulate the real environment good enough.
It kind of skews your results. All of a sudden you don't know the results, or you're not getting results because of the actual test not working, or if it's because of a limitation of the virtualization. So there are some times when you do have to step outside that virtual world.
Yeah, so do absolutely consider that if that's going to be the virtualization always is going to be appropriate. You're going to find probably, as the saying goes, 9 times out of 10 that it's probably perfectly fine and no issues whatsoever. But there's always going to be those little things that could very well be a problem. Some of the wireless stuff we have doesn't work well or is very tough to get working in a virtual environment. Some of the network interfaces, period, can be trouble to get working in the virtual environment. Usually you can get them working, but sometimes little glitches pop up. And then as far as testing against other stuff, it just may not work the way you want it to and give you the desired results. So you may have to occasionally step outside of that virtual environment and get a physical box there. So just so you know, and we're playing by the rules and all that. So once we've addressed that, whether or not we're going to go physical or virtual, and we're going to assume it's going to be virtual, the question is how do you start setting that up? Well, you've got a lot of options, lots and lots of options. One of the things you're going to be testing against most of the time is a system that has that is configured with one of the major operating systems and is set up so you can test these tools and get results from them to see what those results look like. It's all well and good to use something like Kali to target just our system at random, but if you target a system at random, it may that tool you have may not reveal anything because that vulnerability may not exist there. So if you really need to learn how to use that tool and see what the results look like when there is a vulnerability or issue there and when there isn't, you don't have that situation. The other thing is that some of these environments that you can download, they already have the vulnerabilities you already have in there. They document them and tell you these are the vulnerabilities that are there. So if you scan a certain tool and you get a certain result, you can compare it to what they've documented and see, oh yeah, that's what I should be getting based on what they've reported. So they do it helps you out in a number of different ways. Now you don't need to download one of the pre-made ones. You could make them yourself. In some cases, that may be the only way to go. You may have some unique application you're going to be testing against. You don't have another way to do it except to create it on your own, and so you'll need to address that. And hopefully, you can accomplish it the right way. But fortunately, for the stuff we're going to do in here to test the different scanners and things like that, we're going to be going ahead and just using off the shelf, so to speak, virtual machines. And there's so many of them. All you got to do with them though is just drop them in, and they're ready to go. Okay, so what I've done to help this process is I already have downloaded one of the virtual machines that are out there. I'm going to tell you which one you download. That's your call. Which one you choose to download. I just chose one to download and put it in here. It's just one of the ones I'm going to use. Something also I'd point out in here too is don't go crazy with these. I mean, you can download them all, no problem. But don't expect to be running them all at the same time, because unless you've got a ton of memory. I know there's some people out there. I heard someone literally last week that says, I've got 64 gigs in my notebook. Like, all right, whatever. There's always somebody that's got it.
Right.
But that's not the norm.
Ronnie Wong.
Was that Ronnie on there?
Probably.
So anyway, so what I'm going to do is I have in VMware Player, I have two virtual machines. I'm going to open them up both here on my screen. I've got my Metasploitable sitting up here. This is a virtual machine that you can get for free. You can just Google Metasploitable, actually Metasploitable 2. I will show you the link for it here in just a bit, but you can download that or just by Googling it. And then I have my Kali Linux sitting over here in my virtual machine as well. So I've got two virtual machines running in VMware Player. So so I've got the two out there. I can see that they're doing their thing, and everything everything looks looks good. Well, what I can do is let me go over here to Metasploitable, and what I'm going to do is in Metasploitable, I am going to just double check, and I'm going to see what my IP address is. So I'm going to use my ifconfig stuff in here, and I'm just going to do a simple test. I want to see if the two can actually talk. So that
will make the future tests and labs a little bit easier to do, right?
Yeah.
As long as if they can talk to each other.
Yeah, they don't talk. Your tests become really easy at that point. So yeah. So what I'm going to do is I can see the IP address sitting there. You can see under S0. You can see that I have an IP address. If you can't read that, it's sitting right over here. It's 192.168.245.130. So what I can do over here is I've already typed in the nmap command, and hopefully you recognize that if you've been through CEH, which I know probably a good number of you already have. So if you haven't, you really should watch it. It's award-winning. But in any case, we have I have nmap sitting. Yes,
starring none other than Sean Oriana. Right?
Yeah. Well, I am famous. But what I've got here, so I've got nmap. You can see that I have my switch sitting in there, my SYN switch. So I go through and hit enter, and boom, it says, yeah, it hit that machine and said it saw it, and it gave me some results. There's some open services sitting, right there. Okay, wow. So that's kind of neat to see that right away, that it's got some open ports. If I go over here, just to kind of give you another insight into this, I've got TCP dump. This is a if you recall from our CEH, this is a packet sniffer. This is a command line one. There's TCP dump, and then there's WinDump. They both do the same type of thing, but they're command line. So what I'm going to do here is I'm telling it, I go ahead and start it. Excuse me. I start it, and you can see it says sudo, so it's raising privileges. The reason why it didn't ask me for a password is I typed it in really quick on the break, and it holds it for a period of time. TCP dump, but then look, it's got -I for interface, and then ETH0. Remember we talked about that? It's telling it listen on ETH0 for anything. Now, I've positioned these windows to kind of give you a little bit of an insight into this and make it a little more exciting, if I can say that. Is I have Nmap. You know, I just go over to my Kaylee machine and do Nmap again, and hit enter. And you can see on the other machine, what did it do? It's actually, you know, spitting stuff up over there. It's saying that it's actually it's seeing the traffic come from one machine to the other.
Okay.
You know, so we definitely can see not only are they talking, that we can see, you know, specifically, you know, what's happening there. You know, so that's kind of neat to see that. To see what's going on. I'm not dumping that to a file or anything, by the way, on the Metasploitable machine. I'm just ran that just to show you that it's not just pinging it. You know, there's more going on there, and you can actually see that. You can go through that and see the ports it hit and all that good stuff, and see the responses.
Nice.
I mean,
nice.
so that's right there. You will notice the Metasploitable. There is no GUI for this, so there's that whole thing I was telling you. You better get used to command line pretty quickly, because you ain't using Metasploitable if you don't know command line.
Right.
So fortunately, you know, you'll learn some of the stuff in Kaylee as you practice and try things out, and then boom, you'll go over to Metasploitable and start doing little things like that. You know, so you know, kind of neat, you know, to see that sort of thing you know, happening. So that's Metasploitable that I have running, you know, back there, and I can get and just practice with it. There are a bunch of different vulnerabilities on it that we won't worry about right now, but that's just to show you here. It's set up, it's talking, and hey, great, we've got that. There are other vulnerable machines out there. If you're going to be setting up a lab, Metasploitable is far from being the only one. And I'm kind of, for the most part, writing off the fact that you can create your own, because that's pretty specific. That you could, if you're going to create your own, I can't even begin to cover it there. I can tell you, yeah, install Windows or Linux and don't patch it.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say just connect to the internet, let it get hacked up, and then you can go. But that's on your machine, right, on your network. You probably don't want that. That's why these machines that are already set up to be vulnerable are great ways to practice and learn how to use these tools so that I can be efficient when I get in a situation where I've got to do a pen test or a digital forensic investigation or something like that.
Yep.
Very good.
So definitely think about you know, that sort of a, you know, thing, is that, yeah, you can make your own, and you might want to make your own. You might want to just set up a Windows machine and not patch it and do some scans against it to see what happens and what it looks like, get a feel for it.
Or a particular configuration that you're thinking about running, and you want to use these tools to test your configuration before you put it in production environment. See what kind of vulnerabilities you didn't see and that you meant to patch, right? So any number of ways you could use this.
And imagine that if you were doing something like we did in our CEH, where we're talking about, you know, creating accounts and cracking passwords and doing tampering. I mean, you could literally use those skills that we had in the CEH to monkey with the system and create those things, and then see how you could do the same thing on this side of the house with Kaylee, and see if you can detect those sorts of things even when you do an audit. You know, so there are definitely some benefits there, but as far as me telling you how specifically to configure it for that, I couldn't tell you, because that would be very specific to that environment. So, all right, so that is like I said, Metasploitable, and then I've got Kaylee, you know, on here. But again, those aren't the only ones that are out there. There are definitely other utilities or other vulnerable machines out there. That is Metasploit or Metasploitable 2 that is available for you to mess with. It's already set up. All you got to do is just download it and drop it in, and download it. It's going to be in a zip file compressed format. You just download it, expand it, and all you have to do is point your virtualization software to it. You might have to do some memory configuration, not always. In VMware, all I had to do is just point to that folder and select that virtual machine, and it dropped all the settings in it I needed, and it was
Nice.
it was ready to go. It started right up.
And all the vulnerabilities are all built in and already configured, so there's nothing
Yeah.
else to do on that machine other than make sure it's on the right network.
Yeah, that's really it. That's all you have to do. And the stuff we were talking about as far as using ifconfig to configure the network on Kali, you can use the same thing inside of Metasploitable. You can do the
okay.
same thing. So it would just carry across. So it's a universal skill to have. So that's Metasploitable if you want to use that one. But it's, again, far from being the only one. And this is kind of where it gets interesting. There's all these other things, and I've only got a short list of virtual machines here that are vulnerable. This is one called Pwn OS. You can see it's pretty much no frills. Look at that. That's an old web page. It looks like an old
ASCII
web
little
page.
art there, yeah.
Is this GeoCities still? No. Yeah. This is one that's used for doing for pen testing. It's all documented, so you can play with it and practice with it and see what you get. So you got that. There's other ones. You've got this Holy Nix. So it's I don't know where they got the name.
I know, I was going to say, they are so creative with those names, aren't they?
The Holy Nix. But they've got that one. This one again, they tell you right here, on SourceForge, they design it specifically to be vulnerable, and they've got the links to the main project website. Then they have this Twiki one is one that I heard mentioned. The reason why it's mentioned, it's a wiki. It's a wiki application, so it's a web app. And the reason why it's mentioned is a lot of major companies use this, and so it gives you a chance to kind of poke around and get in on the back end and stuff like that and see the database. It gives you experience with that. And even though it might not be something that your company uses or a company you target ever uses, it does give you some experience poking around stuff like a SharePoint or wiki site and working with something that has a database on it.
Right.
So
okay.
you've got that. Then we got one of my favorite ones in here is Sauron. Yeah. So this is one that is used. It's supposed to be a system management utility, but it also has a benefit that you can scan it as you can scan it and check it, try to punch into it. Since it is a management tool, you can kind of explore it and see what's going on with this specific system. So you can just go ahead and drop the thing in and run it and start playing around with that one if you really wanted to.
Nice.
Got to be something that having Sauron on your network.
I love their icon. Obviously, I was going to try. You try to find a link for that one, and I'm coming up with all kinds of things that have nothing to do with what you're talking about, Sean. But there we go. I think that's the one we want.
That's it.
All right. So that's really neat. There's a lot of things out there. I want to build a test lab. I want to really dive in and learn Kali Linux and learn all the different tools. I just don't have the time to set up vulnerable machines. I'm going to have a license for Windows or other operating systems. Got to figure out how to make them vulnerable so that I can do my testing. Here's lots of options. As you go out, and just download these pre-built appliances and fire them up. And now we can really sit here and play with Kali and get some good use out of it.
Yeah, that's really the name of the game, is getting practice with this and seeing what these tools are supposed to produce, get used to what different results look like, so you will recognize that when you go out into the wild. But Mike just brought up something here, is that all the stuff I just did there, those were all Linux machines. So that brings up the question, what do you do if you do have Windows?
Right.
Are you going to have to make those yourself? Well, this is kind of an interesting one. I brought this up on my screen here. This is something that NIST has made available. I don't know how they're doing it, but it's available. It's been published in numerous places. But what this is these are on this specific page. They actually have Windows machines that you can download, and they are vulnerable.
Really?
So you can download these things and use them to check against, and you can see there's a lot of them there, a lot of them up there. So you can go ahead and grab stuff off here too.
Nice.
Like I said, I don't know how they're doing it, and normally if someone told me they had a bunch of Windows virtual machines up there that you could just download it for free, you wouldn't hear me talk about in a place like this. But it's the U.S. government, so I'll assume that, considering who it is, that they've got the clearances and everything for it.
Right.
So that's one place where you can do that if you don't want to set those up on your own. I assume what they are is they're probably some sort of time-bombed release.
That's what I was going to say. They're probably time bomb, play with them a little bit, and then they die, and you have to get them again or something like that. So.
Yeah, it's still good enough. I mean, it's still definitely good enough for for anything we'd be doing. So,
absolutely.
So there you go. Now the one that's kind of left out there in the cold is the Apple products, but you kind of question, are those really left out in the cold? Because I mean, it really is it's a Unix based operating system, and we can get those and learn those through the stuff that we've done in these other areas. So I don't really consider it to be a major roadblock. But if it is, and you really want to get that in the trenches experience directly with something that was made by Apple, then I guess you kind of know what you got to do. You got to go, beg, borrow, or steal an Apple computer and test against it. That's the only way you're going to do that.
Yeah, they're a little bit particular about who gets licenses or access to their operating system, aren't they?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, and you could even, and All tell you, you could even throw in other operating systems on there too, Android and Apple's iOS. Those would all be out there, and those are ones that you're going to have to do pen tests again at some point anyway. Just so you might actually start looking at how you're going to do those. As far as I know, though, you can with Android. You can actually load that into a virtual machine. If you Google it enough, there's developer editions that you can download and stick into a virtual machine, and then you can test against it that way. So you don't necessarily have to find a way to plug a device in or something to your computer or do something that way. You can actually just run it in a virtual machine and scan it. But then again, that's going to be just the clean, pristine version of Android. It's not going to be the one that goes on AT&T or Verizon's phone or something like that. Because those are all different. Every last one of those is different for some reason or another.
Customized,
Yeah.
And I was going to throw another link up there. Microsoft has that test drive thing, and not set up to be vulnerable, right? These are, if you want to go and you want to try SQL or Exchange or something like that, Microsoft has all kinds of virtual hard drives you can download and play with. So maybe you take one of those that's running SQL, and then you set up a database and you see what you can, so you could use those as well. They're trial versions, they're time bombed, but you could make your own vulnerabilities. You could misconfigure the SQL server. You could fire up a web server and just see what it looks like out of the box. What are the default configurations? What vulnerabilities does that leave me open to if I don't change those default settings? So lots of options out there where you don't have to go and take days and days and set up this sandbox or this lab environment.
Yeah, they've made it a lot easier for you to set these things up than it was even just a few years ago. Yeah. So it used to be a few years ago you were going to have to set all this stuff up and set your own sandboxes up and try different things. And like I said, you may still have to. It just really depends on what your specific requirement is, what you're trying to learn, and maybe what you need to pen test against. You're seeing guys up here. I see Ben saying this is MS-DOS and WinNT. Okay, it's not like those are unheard of operating systems nowadays. Those are still out there, those are still very common to see in a lot of these environments. WinNT, I still run into it often enough. And MS-DOS. Yeah. Funny enough, I had someone ask me at one point. This was like about 5-6 years ago. They're going, "How do you secure MS-DOS?" Well, it's MS-DOS. What else do you want me to say?
Right.
That's it. So but if you need to test against those things, at least the DOS one, I believe you can just get the free DOS or whatever and do most of your testing against that and be okay. If you need a copy of MS-DOS, the only way I know how to get it Nowadays, reliably, it would be with the MSDN that gives you access to everything. And so that may be more of an investment that you want to have for customer engagement. Unless you're making tons of bucks off of that, you're probably not going to want to do something like that. But that would be a unique case. One that also comes to mind is OS2 and OS2 Warp. I mean, if you remember those, I mean, those things were that was IBM's operating system for ages. They had that thing sitting out there on their machines, and I think they only killed support for it like 2, 3, 4 years ago. It wasn't that long ago, and they weren't really doing any upgrades to it. They were just still supporting it. And what happened is that when they stopped supporting it, and in fact they haven't really truly stopped supporting it, but there's ATM machines that still run that.
Really?
There's ATM machines over in Europe, Middle East. There's even I hear some here in the States that run OS2 behind the scenes. So you got to ask yourself, if you were asked to pen test a OS2 based machine, where are you going to get it? You ain't getting it from IBM. They won't sell it to you, and there's not an open source version of that.
Right.
In fact, IBM said there will never be an open source version of it. They've said, just plain black and white. That's the way it's going to be. So you're kind of stuck there. You have to go to your client and say, I need something from you to test on, specifically to make that arrangement. But fortunately, I don't see you guys run to OS2 too often. Who knows?
But you never know.
You never know in this world what you might run into. So just be prepared. But you can still, even if you don't have access to those, you can still learn quite a bit even off these vulnerable operating systems. And they've been around for a long time. So there's a long list of them. One of the ones I didn't mention that some of you guys may have heard of is one called it's DVL, Damn Vulnerable Linux is what they call it.
I've heard that.
It's been discontinued. They didn't keep it updated, and finally it was so far out of date that the community just decided we're not even going to talk about that one anymore. We'll list it places saying, yeah, it existed, but hey, it's not useful to you anymore, so don't even bother messing with it.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, Sean, that was a lot of good information. I mean, at this point, we've got Kali Linux up and running, and now we've got a bunch of vulnerable machines on our network that we can start scanning and start testing out, what we can do with Kali Linux and getting our feet wet and starting to learn how to use these tools. So anything else you want to add before we wrap this episode up?
I think we, I think we covered quite a bit of ground there. I mean, you should be already thinking about setting up a lab for doing this. And I would say if you're going to be following along with these with each one of these segments and making sure you're getting the most out of it, you not only want to have a virtual machine set up with Kali, but you also want to have a virtual machine set up with some of those
Metasploitable
Metasploitable. You can choose the one that you want. I would have more than one, because not all of them have the same vulnerabilities, and you want to be able to see what the differences are and how different machines react to certain things. Get used to that. But you definitely want to have one of those to get to one of those vulnerable environments available to you when you're doing this, so you can practice against something. Just make sure you have connectivity and that they can talk, and boom, try stuff out. So it's really the way to go. You got to get your hands dirty and roll up your sleeves to really learn this stuff the full way.
And
if you need OS2, someone's got it. Contact David if you need OS2.
There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed watching this episode. Signing off for IT Pro TV, I'm Mike Roderick.
And I'm Sean Ariano.
And we'll see you next time.